Hello, everybody, and welcome to Orbis Campfire Sessions. I'm Kim Keene, the Director of Marketing for Orbis, and I'm excited to have you guys here today with our panel as we talk about birding and the opportunities that means for landowners and land managers. So, a few housekeeping items. If you haven't joined one of our campfire sessions before, you're in for a treat. We've got a lot of fun things coming up. So, we'll be opening the floor for Q&A at the end of the session. You can submit your questions in the Q&A tab if on the right side of your screen there that you see. If you pull over that, you can pop that up and make sure you say who your question is going to be for, and we'll get to those at the end. Of course, as we mentioned, we've got giveaways. Wouldn't be an Orbis event if we didn't give away some cool stuff. So we've got things like a North Face Orbis jacket, a cool OGO backpack, a campfire blanket, all kinds of stuff. So everybody who submits the questions, you'll be entered into a raffle for some cool prizes. So make sure you get those up. Okay. So if you're like me, you're wondering sometimes how we even got here. Like, why is Orbis talking about birding? And we're not really sure either. But what I will tell you is that birding is obviously like a recreational outdoor activity, and anything with the outdoors or recreation, Orbis is all about. So today, we've assembled a great panel of folks to help school us on the topic and why it's relevant to the timberland investment community and the forest communities. So first up, I want to introduce Adam Bichul. Adam is the Director of Conservation at Georgia Audubon. He has conducted avian field research across the eastern U.S. and South America. He also manages multiple programs and oversees the Georgia Audubon conservation team. So thank you, Adam, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, great. Can't wait to hear what you got to say. So next up, we've got Nick DeLuzio. He's with Georgia Forestry Foundation. And Nick is a certified forester, the vice president of the Georgia Forestry Foundation, where he oversees the programming, the fundraising, and the management of everything going on. So thank you, Nick. Welcome to the panel.
Thanks, Kim. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Cool. So Tiffany Starr is with us today also. She is the Managing Director of Acquisitions for Timberland Investment Resources, also known as TIR. And I'll be honest, Tiffany's list of credentials is like a mile long. This woman is a superstar. She sits on about 50 different boards in the industry, so I'm sure she's not a stranger to many of you on here today. But relevant to today's topic, Tiffany has been instrumental in syncing TIR up with Nick and the Georgia Forestry Foundation to support their birding initiative. So Tiffany, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Kim.
Awesome. And lastly, we have Mac Payton. Mac is a private landowner in Georgia and a Georgia Forestry Foundation trustee, as well as an avid bird watcher. So Mac, I can't wait to hear what you've got to say and hear your insights and learn from you. So welcome to Campfire Sessions.
Thank you. Glad to be here today.
Great. Awesome. Okay, so Adam, why don't we kick things off with you? First up, why don't you tell us a little bit about Georgia Audubon and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I think it might be helpful to start with understanding the Audubon network because it's a bit confusing. I know we have people from all over the country here. There's the National Audubon Society, and they're a big player. They produce that beautiful magazine. They have a network of 400 plus chapters. We at Georgia Audubon are loosely affiliated with the national brand. We have our own strategic plan, our own dues, our own membership. So we're kind of an independent chapter. And there are others across the country, such as Seattle Audubon or Birds Connect Seattle and Portland Audubon. But here in Georgia, we're trying to build places where both birds and people thrive. And we do our work through community outreach, education, and then my pillar of the organization, which is conservation. So we do everything from over 100 free field walks or birding trips across the state. I and my colleagues lead domestic and international birding travel. I'm actually heading off to Madagascar in a couple of weeks, which I'm really excited about. And then we do more on the ground work to educate and engage and then take conservation steps to help our birds, which unfortunately across the board are in trouble. We've lost around 3 billion birds in the past 50 years, which is around a 25 to 30% decrease in our bird populations. So we're doing things to restore habitat, to give greater access to bird watchers, to connect different communities, and just do whatever we can to make Georgia a better place for birds.
Great. Thank you for that info. Wow, that's a staggering number as far as the bird loss. That's interesting to hear. Yeah. Okay, so for those who may not be as familiar with the pastime, or who have preconceived notions about it, explain to us like what birding is all about. Like certainly it's more than just, staring up and looking at birds and trees, right?
I think one of the great things about bird watching or birding is that there are so many different ways to engage with the hobby. According to the Fish and Wildlife Service, there are over 40 million people in our country who call themselves bird watchers. And some of them probably look at their backyard feeder and that's it. They see the same 5 species and they love that and that's what they do. Then you have people like me who travel the world, or I'll drive hours to look for a single individual of a certain species.
Wow.
So there are some of us who are really into our lists. What's my life list? How many birds have I seen since I've become a bird watcher? Some of us even care like how many have I seen in this county or in this calendar year? So it can really vary from a passive, relaxing way to get outside. It can be very active in the community science realm. You can get out and collect data for academic purposes, or you can be competitive about it, honestly, if you want to. There are people who do photography. So it is so broad in how you can engage with the hobby. But I think the main reason it's captured so many people in so many different ways is that birds are everywhere.
Yeah.
We all might like pumas or jaguars or these amazing mammals or badgers or porcupines, but you could spend years trying to find one and you probably wouldn't. But if you go outside almost anywhere in the United States right now, you can find a handful or a dozen different species of birds in and around where we live. So it can be counting birds, it can be taking pictures, it can be learning about their behavior, it can be traveling, it can be being hyper local. There's so much to it.
That's cool. Yeah, that feeds kind of into my next question of why you think, that it's picking up steam and gaining more popularity and more folks are getting into it. And not just, like what you would, I think, assume would be your typical birding demographic, right? Like this is starting to spread across all demographics.
Yeah, like you said, I think there is a stereotype somewhat rooted in the truth that it's a older population, primarily white, looking at your backyard feeders. But birding has really diversified and it really has become even more popular the past couple of years. One of the big reasons this happened was because of the COVID pandemic. A very, very small silver lining was that, people stayed at home. People wanted to engage with the outdoors again. They felt safe. And I think we all kind of slowed down and needed to take a collective breath, and people started noticing birds. It was something you could do at home, you could do at a park, you could see it out your window if you were working from home. So I think that led to a big increase. And a lot of conservation and birdwatching organizations like Georgia Audubon and others, I think have done a good job focusing more on birds at home or birds near you. And that could be on a timber, stand if you have a property like that, or it could be at your apartment in a major city. Birds are there. And I think by bringing that message and connecting with people that, hey, birds aren't just elsewhere. They are sharing the same spaces as us. That has kind of come with some of the other popularity to really diversify who's birding and how many people are bird watching.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I could definitely think back on my days being, stuck in my house and staring out the window and definitely noticing more birds or, questioning, I guess, which bird is what and all of that as I was sitting there. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. Okay, so really quick before we move on, thank you, Adam. We'll come back to you in a little bit here. I want to look at our poll questions real quick, if we could bring those up. If you click on the poll tab that you see there on the top right beside the chat window, you should see these come up. So you can read through those, and if you haven't already, feel free to put your answer in there. And again, we'll review those and talk about those and get our some feedback from our panel on that a little bit later on. Okay, so Nick DeLuzio, let's move on to him. Nick, let's bring you up. And I want to talk about what Georgia Forestry Foundation is doing in the birding space. What's going on?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. So I get this question a lot. We're a forestry organization. What are we doing with birding? When you look at the mission of the Georgia Forestry Foundation, I won't recite it verbatim, but part of it is to ensure the long-term sustainability of Georgia's privately owned working forest by reconnecting youth and adults to the land. So reconnecting people to the land is a really important piece. So what we do at the foundation is we work to build bridges outside of the forestry community to make sure everybody in Georgia understands and appreciates the benefits of our 22 million acres of privately owned managed working forest, more than any other state in the country, I'll add. So as we were thinking about building bridges outside of our community, the birding community is one that's big. You just heard from Adam, 40 million bird watchers across the country. I don't remember the exact number that Adam has, but it's multi-billion-dollar annual economic impact across the state. So it's a big community. Here in Georgia, it's a largely urban community. So when we think about that disconnect between people and the land, that's a lot of Metro Atlanta, where there's a big birding population. So probably about 2 years ago now, Mac and I actually had lunch with Adam and Jared, the executive director of Georgia Audubon, to kind of pitch this idea of a partnership with them, and they absolutely jumped on it. They've been great partners to work with over the last 2 years, and that's led to a program in conjunction with Orbis that has been recently renamed and rebranded as Georgia Bird Bookings. And so it's an opportunity for private landowners, with Georgia's forest being over 90% privately owned. It's an opportunity for private forest landowners to enroll their properties in the program and sell access permits for recreational bird watching on their property. So it does a couple of things. I think most importantly is it builds that bridge between the forest landowner community and the birding community in Georgia, two very passionate and large communities. It opens up potentially up to 90% of the forest land in the state for birding if they participate. And for landowners, it's an additional source of revenue for them. And so everything that we do, we're trying to drive value for landowners all the way up through the forestry supply chain. So I think that the program is a win-win-win for everybody, and it's in the pilot phase. We're working on getting it up and running now, but there's definitely been a lot of interest, and we hope this is something that will grow in Georgia, and then through Orbis can grow nationally.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and you touched on some of what my next question was going to be, which was, what are some of the benefits, or why should landowners be involved? So thank you for sharing on that. And I know that you mentioned, we're still very much in the pilot phase with everything and still getting everything launched. But when everything is come together, essentially, can you break down and give us an overview of how that will work, how people get involved with Georgia bird bookings?
Yeah. So as of now, again, we're still in the pilot phase. So people that are interested, landowners like Mac that are interested in participating, can reach out to me. I'll kind of work with landowners to gather the necessary data and information that we need on properties. All that data gets passed along to the Orbis team, Ashley specifically, and gets uploaded into Orbis's My Outdoor Agent platform. And so that's a really critical piece of this entire project. Without Orbis and without My Outdoor Agent, none of this would work. And so that's the web platform and the app that facilitates that transaction between birdwatcher and landowner. And the great thing about the My Outdoor Agent platform is that it gives landowners a lot of control. Private landowners, a lot of times are hesitant to give up control of their property or allow access to the property to others. MOA, the My Door Agent platform, allows them to do that while still retaining control. So they have a lot of flexibility over when their property is accessible, how much they want to charge, the duration of the permits. So it could be a daily permit, sunrise to sunset. It could be a week. It could be a month. So there's a lot of flexibility and control that landowners have. And then on the back end is, on the other side for the birding community, is that it makes a lot of these properties accessible. I always describe it as a VRBO for land. So the more photos and information and maps and features that we can incorporate, the more attractive that parcel will be. And then when somebody goes online and purchases a permit, 80%, the way that it's structured now, 80% of that revenue goes to the landowner. So it's helping them keep their forest land as forest land, while again working and kind of building that education, educating the birding community about the benefits of managed and working forests.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like there's a ton of flexibility in that model as far as what the landowners have control over, again, deciding, what they want to offer, when they want to offer it, and how much they want to offer it for. So yeah, that's definitely something awesome to consider for that. Thank you, Nick. Okay, I want to bring on Tiffany and get her thoughts on the topic. Again, Tiffany is with TIR. She's been a huge supporter of Georgia Bird Bookings, the program that Nick mentioned. And I just want to hear from you, Tiffany, why do you think this made sense for TIR to get involved with?
Yeah, absolutely. So TIR manages land on behalf of our clients across the country. And so we have about 900,000 acres that run sort of from New York to Oregon. A big percentage of that is in Georgia, though. And so, we're always looking for new technology and market-based opportunities for our clients that add additional revenues to their asset base. And so having something this innovative that really brings the community together with the landowners is just the perfect combination that we're looking for. And any opportunity, I think, as foresters, for us to showcase the stewardship that we provide on the land to more of the general public is exactly where we want to be.
That's awesome. Yeah. I guess, Nick touched on some of this too, but what is the feedback, or have you gotten any feedback so far from your landowners or your investors on opportunities like this? Again, because it is something a little bit more out of the box and newer for our community. So let's talk about the benefits, touch on that a little bit more, and then what has the feedback been so far?
Yeah, so on most of our lands, we have hunting leases. Yeah. That people are very accustomed to, and Orbis has been a great partner in managing that for TIR for quite some time. And so, but not all of our properties are necessarily suitable for hunting. We have the public-private interface that we have to manage. There are certain areas in wetland regions that aren't necessarily accessible for hunting, but they would be perfect for birding. And so this is really just an additional opportunity outside of the hunting lease program that can be additive to bringing more people onto the property, just to see what we as forest managers get to see every day. All of the benefits from working forest for wildlife habitat and clean air and water.
Love it. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, definitely. I think just such a unique option and different avenue for landowners to go down, like you mentioned, instead of just your traditional hunt leases. So that's awesome. Thank you, Tiffany. Mac, you are up next. So let's bring Mac on. So again, Mac is our private landowner in Georgia. He is working with Nick to get his property into this Georgia Bird Bookings that we talked about. Let's see if we can get Mac going here. All right, we'll see if we can pop him up. We will come back to him in a bit. While we're waiting on that, let's go look at our poll questions real quick. So, let me see if we can pull these up. Hang on just a second. Ashley, can you pop over to our poll questions? There we go. Okay, so we asked, do you or someone you know go bird watching? And wow, I mean, that's a huge number, 91%. So yeah, most everybody. That's awesome. I'd love to hear it. Pop down. I want to see also, Ashley, can we try to bring Clarence Neese on? I know we might regret this later having Clarence talk, but he was, gave instrumental in creating some of these questions. Clarence is also an avid birder. He knows a ton about birding. So I want to bring him on to see if he can give some feedback on some of these questions. Clarence, you there? Let's see if we can get Clarence to come on. Looks like he's popping up here. There he is.
Hi, sorry, I'm a little bit delayed behind you guys a little bit, so sorry.
All good. Awesome. Okay. So Clarence, okay, you gave me this question. This bird migrates the farthest distance on Earth. Is it bald eagle, Arctic tern, hummingbird, albatross? And some people may have just went ahead and Googled this, which is fine, but what is the right answer to this?
Arctic tern, everybody seems to understand this one. So it's the Arctic tern. Everybody thinks, the hummingbird or the albatross as big birds, or hummingbird's very popular, very great backyard bird for sure. And it does migrate, but the Arctic tern goes from the Antarctic to the Arctic every year. So it travels about 60,000 miles every year. So
wow,
a long ways.
That's awesome. Okay, good to know. Yeah. And then what was our next question that you threw out at us? Which bird cannot drink both fresh and salt water? Gulls, penguins, pelicans, or ducks? And we had most everybody said ducks. Which one is it?
Is that correct? That's correct. It's ducks. Ducks can drink salt water, but they lack a desalination filter. So they can drink salty water like brackish water, but they can't drink pure seawater for any long period of time. So yeah, that's exactly right. So everybody seems to know their birding for sure.
Wow, cool, awesome. Well, I appreciate you chiming in and giving us those little bird nuggets.
I have no problem. So
okay, see you, Clarence. Okay, all right. Let's bring all of our panel back on. And I want to throw out some questions to everybody and get a good discussion going. So, all right. And again, I think maybe Adam touched on some of this a little bit when you were talking, but I want to talk about stereotypes of your typical birder. And again, we know that it's opening up and a lot more people are doing it. So what are some stereotypes out there that you might want to squash about birding or birders?
Yeah, I'll jump in here first. I think there's a misconception that it's an affluent hobby. Of course, there is a minor barrier in that binoculars are probably something you want to go bird watching. Now, you don't need it. There's all sorts of great birding by ear. There's new apps that can help you with that. So you don't need binoculars, but most people do. And I think they assume they're very expensive, which they absolutely can be. But there are very good and very price appropriate optics that can kind of get you in the game. So I think that's part of it. And I also, like I said earlier, I think there's a misconception that it's an older hobby, but there are so many different youth that are involved in this from diverse backgrounds, urban and rural. So I think the diversity and the price point are maybe things that might scare people off at first.
That makes sense. Yeah. Nick or Tiffany, any thoughts on stereotypes?
Yeah, we're seeing so many people coming into the birding community, and birders of color have created groups across the country with different universities. It's been really exciting to see. And it's just, I think post-pandemic, we're really seeing a lot of folks out there that it's reinvigorated birding for sure.
Cool. Yeah. And are the younger demographic included in that, or are we still talking more of an adult-ish activity?
I think there's definitely a lot more interest from the younger demographic. I mean, I guess I'm considered a geriatric millennial, and I've got a lot of my friends are big into it, and then people in kind of that next generation. I think there's from what I see, there's a lot more growing interest.
Awesome.
There's one more thing I thought of when we were asking earlier about maybe part of the growth, and I thought about maybe with social media, bird photography is somewhat easy to do and out there. And for the really young birders that I've been seeing, teenage kids, I'm so jealous of their camera equipment. I think now that good cameras are a little bit more approachable in price.
Or even on your phones now.
Exactly. Yeah. I have a thing where I can hook up my cell phone to my spotting scope, and I use that to take videos and photos and whatnot. And a lot of kids are really taking advantage of all the technological advances that are related to bird watching.
That is a great segue into my question about technology. So Nick was talking about My Outdoor Agent as the platform that Georgia Bird Bookings is going to run through. And again, it's a newer kind of innovative platform, or something new from this industry, at least, right? As far as like how we're running leases or offering leases and permits. So from a technology perspective, I want to get you guys' thoughts about, any upcoming trends or other like tech trends that are happening that could be advantageous in this birding space or in the recreational leasing space in general.
I'm going to jump in so I can steal Adam's thunder. But I'll add this as a very novice birder. But there's an app it's out on the market now called Merlin. I think birding can be very intimidating to get into. I think I remember seeing Adam somewhere. There's like 350 bird species in Georgia alone, and that's probably not including migrants. And maybe a dozen of those people are generally familiar with. But when it gets down to identifying, what type of warbler it is, or a sparrow, or a thrush, I mean, it can get intimidating. But the Merlin app can go a long way with helping that. So it can help with bird ID, but I think the coolest thing that it has is it'll listen through your cell phone to the bird songs in the area. So if you're out walking in the woods, you open up Merlin, fire it up, and then as you're walking, it'll pick up a bird song, and it'll come on and tell you what that bird is that's calling. And
that's crazy.
From everything I've heard, it's pretty accurate, and
wow.
That's awesome. Impressive.
Now I don't. Can you put that in the chat window for the group here, or have spell that, or where they should go if there's a website or something? I think that would be very beneficial for folks trying to get started. I definitely want to check it out. Cool. And then I want to talk about, again, we're talking about something new or a newer idea that we're trying to get landowners or offer to landowners and private landowners. So what is y'all's advice on how they get started on, offering things like this or other like out of the box recreation activities? Like, how do we start to, I don't want to say like convince, but maybe persuade or have people start thinking differently about, again, getting out of that traditional mindset of just hunt leases or things like that. Tiffany, why don't you start?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that we can be as creative as people are willing to be, right? Because we have so many different habitat types on our properties that we would welcome other people to enjoy. And, if there's an interest out there, I think now with this platform in place, we could set anything up that people are interested in seeing out there. So whether it's, looking for aquatic species, if people want to hunt for salamanders or whatever that may be along those lines, it'd be interesting to see what comes next.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it. Adam, Nick, anything you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I'll mention, kind of building off the technology that kind of feeds into this. There's a similar app called, or not similar, but both organized and owned by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It's called eBird. And it's the idea that there are, I think on the eBird platform, they have hundreds of thousands of users, like 6, 7, 800,000 users. I think they're approaching or just past their 1 billionth bird observation. So the idea is people like me, we go out, we keep track of everything we're seeing on a given day. And historically, that would just sit in a notebook on your shelf or on an Excel spreadsheet or something. But eBird harnesses all those checklists by housing them. So you can get all sorts of information about where birds are, how to find a rare bird, the time of year they show up. But for properties who want to take part of this and advertise outside of Orbis, eBird is an option. So, I went birding at Matt's property a year or two ago, and it was a windy November day, not ideal bird watching conditions. We still had 33 species of birds. And so, his property could become, if he wanted to, or if a different owner wanted to be, paid and farm private access and then link to the Orbis link. And that way birders like me can see, oh, wow, there are 150 species at this farm. I want to go there. So it's kind of a way to passively advertise to the birding community what's there and how to get there. So it's just another technological way to try to get the process started and let us know what's there and why we might be more interested in coming to your space.
Awesome. Very interesting.
And one thing I'll add on eBird, maybe a little bit of a challenge to the Orbis team going forward on MOA, but I've learned a lot from Adam in the last 2 years that we've been working together. And one of the things that I learned is that for the birding community, when they're looking for properties to go to, they go to eBird, and they have hotspots you can pull up. And so the more people that go on and log a list as location, it'll get hotter and hotter, and people can see everything that's been recorded at that property in the past. And so I think thinking about Georgia bird bookings and the MOA platform going forward, I think it would be, I hope there's a way to integrate kind of the MOA platform and then pull some of the eBird data into it so that any property that's enrolled in Georgia bird bookings on MOA is also a hotspot on eBird. So the birding community, if they're looking at eBird, they find a hotspot, they can see everything that's there, and then that will link to the profile, the page for that property on MOA to complete that purchase and complete that transaction. I think it'll a linkage between those two sites would drive a lot of traffic.
That's awesome. I love that idea. Yeah, Clarence, take note. I know he's on here, so take some notes. His hair is probably like on fire right now.
It's good he's off camera.
Yeah, awesome. All right, thanks, guys. Okay, so let's move on to our hot or not round. And I know we're still trying to get Mac back in the mix here, having technical difficulties. So if he joins us, that's awesome. If not, no worries. Guys, you should have some signs with you that represent a flame or an extinguished flame. So I'm going to say a phrase, and you're going to tell me, hold up your flame if you think it's hot, meaning that, something that everybody should be paying attention to. We should be on the lookout. It's kind of big or upcoming, or it's not hot. It's not important. We shouldn't be concerned. It's no longer relevant, etc. So hold up which sign, whatever sign correlates with your answer or your thoughts on it. All right. Okay. First one, invasive species, hot or not? Adam says not. Okay. Nick with the not. Okay. Everybody says not. Why should we not be concerned? Who wants to take it?
Well, I guess I would take that as it's definitely something to be concerned about, but we're definitely against it. So we're trying to eliminate all of those invasive species that we possibly can on our properties. And I mean, that goes back to good forest management and good wildlife management, and certainly improves bird habitat across the board.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Yeah, it's definitely better for the habitat. And one thing we tried to specifically point out for birds is, 95% give or take of our songbirds need insects at some point throughout the year, either to feed themselves or more frequently to feed their young. And our insects and our native plants have a very tight connection down to the chemical level. And so if we're letting non-native invasive plants dominate, we're robbing birds and other wildlife of that insect life that we need to kind of be the food supply for our wildlife. So from a bird perspective, that's one of the major issues, is how it impacts native berries and native food and the insects as well.
All right. Cool. Migration patterns, hot or not? Would you? I think he says hot. Yeah, okay. Hot. Who wants to take this one?
Adam.
Okay, I can go. Yeah, I was torn because migration is like the absolute coolest thing. Like, I'm the biggest of bird nerds, and it just blows my mind. I mean, hummingbirds might not be going from one pole to the other, but to imagine that little bird doubling or tripling their weight and then flying nonstop across the Gulf of Mexico. I've said that line 1,000 times, and I still get excited every time I think about it. So now's a great time. Birds are migrating to the southeast. I know we have some people from the northwest. It's a great time, especially on your coast, to see all those birds. So migration in general, super red hot, the coolest thing in birds. There are threats that these birds face on migration, so that's a little less hot, or potential climatic impacts on affecting birds. And when they arrive and where they go, that's less hot. But having good forests and healthy habitats for them is hot. So it's very complex, but in general, it's fall migration. Birds are awesome, and their migration just is hard to understand. It's so mind-boggling.
You just went into all of my next topics. I rolled into one of it. So, like climate change, hot or not, as far as birding? No, he says a big no. Okay, big no. No.
Now, I will say it's a big no for me because it's negatively impacting birds. One way it's doing so, and I know it's affecting some producers depending on what they're growing. Early springs followed by a hard cold snap. That I know in Georgia we've had, like, our blueberry industry has been hit by that. Our peaches. I'm sure there might be an equivalent to timber that I'm less familiar with, but that affects those. And these birds, when they're down in Cancun, ready to come back up to Georgia, they don't know what the weather is here. They're basing their migration off of day length and things like that. So if the flowers are budding out early, or if a cold snap like that comes and it knocks back the insects, they're expecting some predictability when they return. And so climate can affect that and throw off the phenology, the timing of our natural systems, which is one of the big negatives, in addition to what conditions birds can do. Now, from just the bird watching hobby aspect, I will say it's a little hot, only because weird birds start showing up places. It's probably a troubling sign. But we mentioned Idalia, the hurricane that came through not too long ago. American flamingos from the Yucatan showed up in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Tennessee. And so bird watchers have been going crazy chasing down those flamingos.
That's kind of sad, though, right?
It is sad. Now,
it's kind of sad.
A lot of that, it always has occurred. It's a natural phenomenon that happens. These birds normally get displaced. Some make it back. But it's just the frequency of it happening now, and the strength of it is the real problem. Birds in the Caribbean have always lived with those storms. But again, the severity, the frequency, and the other threats the birds are facing, like habitat loss, adds to the problem.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. What about, kind of tied into this, and these are maybe similar, urbanization, and then one that I'm very curious about is the impact of artificial light, or light from buildings as these birds are migrating. Not hot. Not good. All right.
Well, I don't want to hog this, but if I can jump in again,
No,
this is one of my babies, one of my big projects here at Georgia Audubon. So urbanization as a whole, I think there are smarter ways to have our built environment that people like to live near green spaces. They like connectivity here in Atlanta. Trail systems connecting us is a big deal. So that is great. I think trying to marry our built environment and where we live, urban and rural, with wildlife is a good thing, but we need to reduce the threats that can come with that. And some of the big ones are glass, and then, like you mentioned, the ambient light at night, the light pollution. Again, I mentioned earlier, it's migration right now. There are, I think in 2 nights over the state of Georgia, we're forecasting around 25 million birds flying over our state. And what many people don't know is the overwhelming majority of those birds fly at night. They don't fly during the day. They fly at night where there are calmer skies. There are no hawks about. They use the stars and the setting sun as some of their beacons as they move. And like a moth to your front porch light during the summer, birds are attracted and confused by bright lights. And so they're more likely to get sucked into urban areas or illuminated spaces where they can either, land somewhere they shouldn't, or even run into a facade. Or the bigger issue is then the next morning they find themselves in downtown Seattle or downtown Atlanta or downtown New York, and there's a maze of glass and other threats that can become an issue. So, building collisions and how that's related to lighting is the 3rd leading cause of bird loss in our country. Hundreds of millions of birds a year die from that cause. So it's a big issue, only surpassed by habitat loss, which is part of the reason that GFF and us are working so hard on this program.
Yeah, and that was another one on my list as far as habitat loss was deforestation. So we all know that, that's a big one. Nick is ready to go. So I want to talk about that issue, but then also, do you guys have, tips or I guess what thoughts about what we can do to try to alleviate some of these issues for the birds?
So I wanted to chime in real quick, Kim, on the habitat loss and urbanization. One of the talking points that I use in almost every presentation I give, I think it's required, is in Georgia we lose 120,000 acres on average annually of forest land due to conversion. It can be conversion to ag, but increasingly more and more it's conversion to development. And so that land, if it's developed, it's pretty much permanently lost. If it goes into ag, there's a lot of transition from forestry to ag and back into timber. But once it's developed, that land is pretty much gone. And so, I talked earlier about the mission of GFF. I mean, ultimately, I think our goal, and hopefully, Tiffany would agree, one day, eventually we want that number to be 0. We've got a long way to go. I don't know if that will ever get there, but we work hard every day to keep our forests as forest. And a big piece of that, since Georgia's over 90% private ownership, is making sure that all of our landowners in the state, from somebody that owns 40 acres to the larger institutional landowners, that they can afford to keep their forest land as forest land, but they more than afford it, they need to be able to maximize the value of their land. And so this is, I think, one of the reasons we're so excited about this program is it's a way, just one way, that landowners can work to maximize the value of the land and help them to keep their forests as forests and not sell to development or convert to pecans or convert to solar, which may be unpopular opinion.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. Okay. Looks like maybe we're getting Mac back. Mac, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Awesome. Welcome back.
Well, sorry, I'm on my cell phone. I'm not sure what happens to my computer.
No worries. Hey, so I want to give Mac a chance to answer some questions for us real quick, since we have him on, and you guys, the panel, you guys can stay on while we talk to Mac and share your thoughts here too. So Mac, again, you're a private landowner, but an avid birder. I want to talk about, tell me why you like bird watching, what keeps you hooked or interested?
Well, just like everyone's already said, I mean, birds are just fun to watch.
Yeah.
And, I think they're relaxing, they're enjoyable, you feel better when you see a bird hopping around. It's kind of hard to say, but you go out and watch birds a while and you come back, you'll feel better than when you started.
I love it. Therapeutic, right?
Yep, they are.
Awesome. Cool. So what are some of the species or bird species that you've seen on your property? And you're in Georgia, right? What corner of Georgia?
I'm in the middle of Georgia, kind of on the fall line.
Okay, all right. So what kind of species are you getting, are you seeing, and which ones do you get excited about?
Well, I enjoy the water birds mostly more. The herons and the osprey and the wood ducks and the kingfisher. In fact, there's one right there. See on the back of my desk.
Oh, nice.
So I love the warblers and the vireos when they come through in the spring. I can't see those as well, but thanks to Adam and my my Merlin app, I can identify them now, even though I can't see them. So they're just a lot of fun.
I love it. I love it. So how do you feel? Tell me about, we were talking about this Georgia bird bookings program that Nick has been working on that's about to launch. And it sounds like you're going to include your property in there as to offer up folks to come on and start birding. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. And so what do you hope to see from that, or why do you decide to do that?
Well, one, as a forest landowner, and any other landowners on here know, we're always looking for a way to increase our cash flow on our farm. So that's one reason. But really more important than that, I think, and Nick touched on it earlier, I think it's important to show the urban population, the people that aren't in the country, the importance of Georgia forest. Mm-hmm. And to get out there, once they see the forest, they see how sustainable forestry. They see how sustainable forestry is good for birding. It's good for all biodiversity. It's good for water. It's good for air. It's important that the general population supports Georgia's keeping so many forests. So that's really the main reason. And kind of for me, I think, I'm fortunate to have land. Everybody's not. I think for those of us who do have the land, to share it with those who don't is a good thing to do. As well as, I think Nick mentioned earlier that, landowners typically, and I come from a long line of them, don't want anybody messing with them. They want their private property rights. I think opening this up to people the way we're trying to do will help ensure that we continue to have these private property rights, because we're being good stewards of the land and sharing it with the greater population. So I think that's important as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Mac. Yeah. You guys want to piggyback off of any of Mac's comments? I think those are really great points.
Well, I obviously echo everything Mac said. I think one thing, Mac, not maybe to put you on the spot here a little bit, I've gotten a lot of questions about, the birding program and hunt leases. The bird migration periods overlap with turkey season in the spring, deer season in the fall, and I know you have a lot of hunt leases on your property, but you've thought through a way to try and do both. Can you touch on that a little bit? I was going to mention that because
unlike Tiffany, I don't have 50,000 acres. So my few acres are all leased to deer hunters. But I've talked with some of them, and my plan is to have a couple of areas where people don't turkey hunt. So that opens up spring migration, which is an important part. So I'll have opportunity to lease that. And then for areas where they do, I'm going to designate certain days that they don't turkey hunt, so it'll be open for birding. So that's kind of and in the deer season in the fall, I'll probably do the same thing, because they don't hunt every day of the week. So it'll be a little harder, but I think you can do both if you work with your leaseholders.
I'll chime in too. I think there's been a lot of attention paid towards spring and fall migration, rightfully so. That's when birding is probably at its peak. There's the most diversity. People are looking for these birds that they only have a few weeks to see. But I'll just say, depending on your property, the best time for visitors to come, or when there would be the most interest, it could be summer, it could be winter. And I'm not as familiar with the seasons here in Georgia of turkey and deer hunting, but I remember Mac had a nice little wetland area back in his property, and I could see Swainson's warblers breeding there. And so Georgia birders might really want to head to his place in June. Or if you had a nice wetland, Tiffany mentioned some properties later, if you have good waterfowl or rusty blackbirds, which, this might sound like a made up bird to you, but that would draw birders in different times of year. So I think it'll be very property specific, and there's lots of ways to work with the goals of the land and of the landowner.
Yeah, awesome. That's good. That's good. And I think, as if there's landowners on this call, and if y'all are considering or thinking about it and have questions, certainly Nick and Adam and Tiffany Mack, everybody on our panel, we can make their information available if you have questions afterwards that we aren't able to get to. So I think this is a good transition over to our audience Q&A. So let me see if any questions have come through for you guys. So I see one that says, what is the most sought after bird that migrates through Georgia?
The ivory-billed woodpecker.
we get plenty of calls about this.
That's a joke for
yeah.
just to make sure.
No, not the woodpecker.
The woodpeckers is almost certainly extinct, but a lot of people are trying hard to find it and convinced that they have them in their backyard in Metro Atlanta, which is not the case. I mean, there are so many to pick from. One that I'll mention for our Georgia coast is the red knot. It's a shorebird that, while not doing quite the journey that the Arctic tern does, it goes down to southern South America and all the way up to the Arctic. There was even one individual that was banded, had a little bracelet so we could track it, and it had migrated the equivalent from the distance of Earth to the moon. So they called it the moon bird. And then it kept living, and it made its way halfway back, or the equivalent distance before it finally disappeared. So that's a bird if you're on the Georgia coast. I mean, inland there are just so many. There's a bird called the upland sandpiper, which is like this goofy-looking, long-necked chicken-type bird that has this amazing whistle sound, and it tends to stop in Georgia only on sod farms or ag land that has real short grass. So you pretty much can't find it unless you're on a property that's privately owned and producing some sort of product. And then, Mac mentioned the warblers. We're lucky in Georgia that there's a convergence of migratory routes, birds going to the Caribbean, birds flying across the Gulf, and those kind of hooking around Mexico. So we get so many little jewels. Cerulean warbler, a bright blue and white bird is maybe the most sought after in Georgia.
Wow. Adam, you are really a bird nerd, but
I am.
I love it. Thank you. Okay, I want to try to get through some of these other questions real quick. Somebody asked, can you give an idea of the general price range for current price range for a day use access pass? Do we have, again, I think maybe it's also just advice on what that price should be.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's one of the maybe top 3 questions that I get asked a lot. And, we're in this pilot phase. I think some of what we're going to be doing is also some, sensitivity analysis on both sides to kind of see what landowners are willing to accept and what the birding community is willing to pay. And that's going to differ by property. But what I tell landowners when they ask that is I let them know that, whatever they set their fee at, 80% of that is what they get. And so it comes down to what the landowner wants or is willing to accept to allow access to their property.
Yeah.
So I don't have a good answer for that yet. But I think over time we'll kind of ferret that.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine again, pretty low, right? I mean, not like
it's not going to be a ton of money,
right? But still passive income, right? That you wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. Yeah.
And the other thing that I tell people is, when you have a deer lease, you're leasing that or a hunt lease, you're typically leasing that to one club for a season or for a year. Yeah. With the birding, Georgia bird bookings, you can have one permit available to your property every day. You can have 5 permits available to your property every day. So the dollar value will be smaller, but the aggregate and the potential aggregate I think is larger.
Gotcha. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, I want to run through these really quick, and so we can try to get through trivia, get some more folks some prizes. So somebody asked, what is the most common songbird in Georgia? Can somebody spit that out real quick?
We'll say northern cardinal. Northern cardinal is very common. Tufted titmouse is another more southern bird that we have a lot of.
Love it. Okay, what is the rarest bird to observe in Georgia?
Unfortunately, red cockaded woodpecker is getting on that list. That's a bird that used to thrive in longleaf pine. It'll make do on some good private timberland as well. So that's one that comes to mind. Another bird called the black rail and the golden-winged warbler are right on the verge of being extirpated or missing from Georgia. But those are two that are highly sought after.
Got it. Okay. Add them with the bird facts. All right, real quick, because we're running out of time here, but I do want to try to throw out a trivia question or two. So, guys, we're going to use the chat window, okay? So make sure you're under the public chat window here. And so the first person to type in the correct answer is going to be our winner. So, actually, Clarence, I'm going to have one of y'all help me track who gets in there. Okay, so let's go to this one. This bird species is often considered a sign of spring, despite the fact that it can be found across most of the United States throughout the year. First person to type in the answer and get it right. Again, this bird species is often considered a sign of spring, despite the fact that it can be found across most of the U.S. throughout the year. Anybody got a guess?
I know what it is.
Okay, no takers. So, Mac, what is it?
What's the robin?
It's a robin. You're right. Awesome. Okay, maybe this one is easier. All right. Brightly colored, common backyard bird, eastern U.S. It's the state bird of 7 different states. It's also the name of a professional baseball and football team and a bunch of universities. You guys got to know this one, right?
You got to know this one.
It's associated with holidays a lot. Anybody know what we're talking about? Bird species.
They're doing good in the chat.
Everybody.
Lots of right answers in the chat, so that's good.
Oh, can I just not see it? Am I in the wrong one?
Maybe not, yeah.
Oh, okay, awesome.
As the person who wrote these questions, I'm happy to see good answers in the chat, yeah.
Oh God, okay, sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing. So yeah, no, we got a lot of right answers. Awesome. So I see those coming in. Thank you guys for your responses. So yeah, we will certainly credit you with those and contact you afterwards and get you guys some cool stuff sent out. Awesome. Okay, so we got 1 minute left. Real quick, I just want to thank everybody for being here and joining us for this birding session. I hope that y'all learned a lot. I certainly did. Again, if you joined late or if you want to share this later, we're going to have the recording up on our social media and our YouTube pages, so you can find that there. If you want some more information on Georgia bird bookings, you can reach out to Nick or reach out to Orbis. We can share their contact info. You can also go to georgiabirdbookings.com and get more info there, or myoutdooragent.com for info on that platform. So again, this has been so much fun. Thanks, guys. Happy birding to everybody. I hope that you'll consider this as a new hobby or a new investment opportunity. Thanks to our panel for joining. Everybody have a good one. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.